All right, so here we are. I'm finally getting out here to do an update on the corn and soybeans. I should have probably did this probably a month ago, but I'm going to show you pretty much all my corn and soybean plots quick, just to kind of show the comparison of the NutriCrave, the different planting methods. And yeah, so right here, this is my no-till corn into the standing rye. You can see all the rye thatch. See how thick this rye thatch is still? I mean, the soil is like an inch under that or more. You look in there, I never even had to spray this post-emerge, because the simazine I sprayed pre-emerge the day I planted, and just the thick rye thatch there held back a ton of weeds. You can see how green this corn is yet. It hasn't even started to dry down yet, because this was planted right around like June 10th, I think. I'll take you over there in a second. This other corn plot over here, I didn't get any footage of planting. That was planted probably 3 or 4 weeks earlier, and that stuff is starting to dry down, and it's actually a little better. It's just had a little more time to grow, I guess. And it's wetter soil on the other plot over there. You see we got some weed growth in here now, but not much, really, considering I never sprayed this. And we got some pretty big gaps in some of these rows, just because, you know, our planter is not really a no-till planter, and I was just lucky to be able to drill through here. The ground was soft enough to get, you know, most of them to grow. And you can see a lot of really nice sized ears, and a lot of these plants in here actually have 2, just simply because it's probably slightly lower population than what it should be. But yeah, this rye thatch is amazing. Nothing has come through here. And that simazine is only good for like 60 days. And, you know, the corn was able to get up within 60 days and shade out most of the ground. So that's why only a few weeds have really come in. I'll pick off 1 or 2 ears in here, and then I'll head over there and pick off 1 or 2 ears, and we'll kind of compare. This stuff, like I said, isn't really dried down yet. It's pretty green yet. So obviously these outside rows are usually always the best. Just getting more sunlight here. You can see we got a little better spacing on the plants here. This is the same variety of corn, same planter. It's just, you know, worked ground, so we got a lot better germination. Like I said, our planter is not really a no-till planter, so that's why some of that was kind of patchy over there. Look at this. Every single plant on this edge here has got 2 pretty good sized ears, and it's thicker population too. I mean, look at all that. That's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5, 6 ears right here. And like, look how close those plants are. They're like literally growing right next to each other. It's not what you want really, but you get in here, yeah, there is a couple gaps, but these gaps are from cranes. I was watching them pull them out. I'd come out here and there'd be a couple here and there on top of the ground. So all these gaps in here and these rows are from cranes pulling them out. Not the most gigantic ears, but almost every single one of these has 2 ears on them. This plant's only got 1 good one, but it's big. And then on the far side of this plot, we have some silage corn. I'll show you the difference of that. I mean, even when you get in here, almost all of these plants have 2 ears. This one's got 1, that one's got 1, this one's got 2. Well, I wouldn't say all of them, but probably at least 30% in here have 2 ears. Just look at all that. That's unbelievable. This is probably some of my best looking corn on the whole property, and it's simply due to because this is probably the best ground we have. It's low, but not too low. Like one of our other wetter fields out there I'll take you to next. That corn looks pretty good too, but we can't usually plant that as early as we can plant this corn because it's just a little too wet out there, typically in May. But this year we probably could have got out there earlier, but there's just so much to do, you know. We can't plant all this here in one day with our little equipment. But yeah, Right over here is the silage corn coming up. I think we're in it now. I think it splits. So it's hard to see on the camera, and it's even hard to see in real life here too. But this right here is where it splits. The left side is the silage corn. The right side is the field corn. You can maybe just see a small height difference. And if you go outside the plot or from the air, you'll see that this corn looks a little different from a distance. I'd say on average, these ears are probably a lot bigger, but every plant only has one. Or like this field corn, yeah, here's another. I guess that's the easiest way to tell the difference. Now that I'm standing right here, see just a bunch of big giant ears. You turn to this row, we got multiple ears per plant, and they're a little smaller. But in reality, that's probably maybe slightly more grain. I know these silage corn kernels are a little smaller too. And you can see we got weeds in here, but I did have to spray this area once, obviously. Being tilled, there's just more weeds. I sprayed this area with Simazine the day we planted, but like I said earlier in the year, we didn't get any rain for like at least 3 weeks after planting. So my Simazine was kind of not the most effective on a lot of my corn this year. Or like that no-till spot that was planted later on. And we got a good rain after planting that, and that Simazine just did a really good job. Plus the rye thatch. All right, I'll pick off 1 or 2 of these silage ears, and I'll pick off 1 or 2 of these field corn ears, and we'll go out and compare against that no-till plot. You can't really get a full comparison of this because this is definitely better ground here. Just kind of neat to see the difference, I guess. All right, so here we are. This right here is the no-till corn. You can see this stuff is just starting to dent, where a lot of this stuff is a little further along. It's like fully dented. So this is field corn, this is field corn, and this is silage corn over here. The no-till field corn in this field is about the same size as the field corn down there in the wetter plot. I don't know what this would yield for bushels, but I think it looks pretty good to me. And then the silage corn here, on average, is a little bit bigger. And, you know, I tried to take like one of the smaller ears I could find, and then one of the bigger ears I could find. There was a lot of them in between these two sizes, you know. And then the same thing here, the silage corn was pretty consistent. I mean, there wasn't many smaller than this, and there was not many bigger than this. So everything was about the same. The spacing was pretty good in the wetter plot, like I said. I'll snap some of these in half just to get a rough idea of how many kernels around they are, I guess. So this is kind of interesting here. We got 16 around on the bigger ear and 18 around on the smaller ear. You can clearly see that these kernels are bigger than these. So I don't know how that would affect yield. It's all about test weight. These bigger kernels will probably make up for the one less row around. And then these are this is the opposite here on the field corn in the wet spot. I got 16 and 18. And then on the silage corn, it's the same thing again. It's reversed, was what you would think. I got 16 on the bigger one and 18 on the smaller one. You can see the same thing here. The bigger ear has bigger kernels, so yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'm gonna go in and pick off a big silage corn and a big field corn, and we'll compare that to the NutriCrave and the other field corn I have out there, because these are all split in half now. All right, so before I head out there and show you some of the NutriCrave areas, I'm gonna do a quick update on these beans here. I was just, you know, right there's the no-till plot, right there's the wetter plot. You see the deer are just in here hammering these beans right now because they're still somewhat green. These are the beans on the property that are the furthest along. I got brassicas coming up somewhat in between these wide 38-inch rows. You can see these rows are just pounded with deer tracks. And so like I said, these are these 38-inch row beans here. They almost canopied over in certain areas, like right up here. I mean, I don't think I'm gonna try planting beans on 38-inch rows next year, especially if I can find a good pre-emergent, herbicide for the beans, because that's the main reason why I wanted to try planting them on 38-inch rows, so I could cultivate to kill out a lot of the Roundup resistant weeds, like some of this stuff right here and this lamb's quarters. I mean, look at all that seed on there. But if I can get a good pre-emergent for the soybeans and hold back most of these broadleaf weeds, I'll just go right back to broadcasting them, or just planting the rows tighter, where I won't cultivate, obviously. These tops are all pretty well nipped off, but they're turning yellow fast. And right over here is some of the broadcast soybeans, basically from my leftover. And you can see that there's maybe a handful of more weeds on this side, but not really much. Every year that I plant this field, though, this edge over here just gets more shade. The weeds don't usually come in as thick and get as big as they do out more near the middle. And look at how big those weeds are right on the edge of the pumpkins there. It's just, you know, more sunlight there. But obviously the beans are about the same height. Maybe these ones in these rows are a little bit more bushy. They probably have more beans per plant too. What I'll do is I'll pick off a good sized plant in the broadcast section and a good sized plant in the rows here, and we'll kind of count up the pods quick and see what they did. I had to make a special plate where I ground off some more of the teeth on the planting plate, so I would plant these beans extra thick, because I knew on these wide rows that these beans would need to get planted super thick. And early on I thought it still wasn't going to be thick enough. The deer were they were really pounding them. I thought they were going to maybe wipe them out early on, but they were able to recover. And in some of these rows I actually double planted. I think this middle row, these 2 rows I'm in right now, I actually double planted another pass right on top of it. So that's why when you look in here, it might actually be a little bit too thick. I mean, look at how thick the stems are in there. Where you go over 1 row, this was just a single pass here. And this is probably more what you want. These stems are like the size of your finger almost for spacing. I mean, there's pods on there, but not really a ton. I mean, these definitely aren't the best beans I've ever grown. I think the whole nation has got kind of a smaller bean crop this year because of the drought and whatnot. But yeah, these are definitely not the best looking beans I've ever grown, especially in this field. I had some beans in here like 2 years ago that were just fantastic. They were like waist high and over 100 pods per plant. And that was all broadcast. I mean, there was weeds in them too, but they really produced good. All right, I'll pick off a plant here. All right, so the left one is the 38-inch row bean, and this is the broadcast bean. Pretty similar looking. I tried to pick off ones that, you know, had a little bit of branch structure, because, you know, when the beans get planted thicker, it's just gonna have a single stem. It's not gonna have, you know, a ton of pods. And this really isn't the best comparison by no means. It's just a, you know, rough idea, and I'm just curious too. Because like I said, I've picked off beans this time of year in my plots over the last couple years, and I kind of remember what they did. A good looking plant like this in each plot. You see we got all the nodules on here. This is going to release nitrogen back in the ground once these things die off. But yeah, I'll count this up. All right, so quite a difference here. These are piles of 40 right here. This is a pile of 20, and there's 4. So the 38-inch row bean had 104 pods. And then the broadcast bean, this is 20, 20, and 11. So it only had 51. So quite a big difference. And there was quite a few flat pods near the top on both plants. And there was quite a few pods that were just like, had 1 bean in it. Some of these I didn't even count. And a lot of them had only 2 beans in this pod right here. And I didn't see a single pod on either plant with 4. Like the most was just 3 like normal. But in previous years, there's been like hardly any flat pods, hardly any pods with just 1. There's always a couple with 2. And it was a bunch of them with 4 seeds in each pod in the past. And this one's only got 51. This one's got almost double. That's because this broadcast section is quite a bit thicker, and it's obviously more shaded being on the edge like that. So this really isn't a good comparison at all. It's just a rough idea of, you know, here's a really good sized plant in this field. How does that compare to last year or 2 years ago when I had beans in here? So like I said, it's not quite as good. My corn looks pretty good this year, but my beans, this is probably the worst they've been in a while, and for weed pressure too. I mean, my beans are pretty weedy this year. You'll see in the next plot of beans later in the video, they're really weedy. So yeah, just a quick little rough idea of what they did. I'm gonna take you out to that NutriCrave spot next. All right, so here we are in the Field of Dreams plot. The first 8 rows here are all NutriCrave. And then the rest of this field's all the same 100 day field corn variety. The NutriCrave's 108 day corn. So right here is where it switches from field corn this way and NutriCrave this way. It's really hard to tell on the ground here, but I know it's 8 rows in. And from the air, when I took the drone up a couple weeks ago, it was very noticeable. I don't know what it'll look like today. I'll do some drone footage at the end of the video here. You might be able to see the difference, but a couple weeks ago, it was really easy to see the difference from the air. And you can still see I'm dealing with the same thing here. Quite a few weeds. Obviously the NutriCrave, I couldn't post-emerge spray with glyphosate. I sprayed this whole field with simazine the day we planted. In the field corn areas, I came back and sprayed with glyphosate later on. So right here, we're in a pretty weedy patch because this is, see how dark this ground is? This is the wetter side of the field right here. And it gets even lower that way. But when you walk up this way, watch how the weeds just disappear. And I have noticed this, you know, for multiple years now. In all my wetter ground areas, I'm always battling more weeds, more water hemp and lamb's quarters. When you get up into this a little bit drier ground up here, look at that. The weeds are gone. They just disappeared. And like I said, this way is NutriCrave, so this was never even sprayed. Look how good the weed control was in here. Simazine and cultivating 3 times. And we got like no weeds. You go this way. Now I'm in the field corn. This section was sprayed, and so was this down here where it was really weedy. That was sprayed as well, but all this survived. So a lot cleaner stand of corn. It's just a different soil type, basically. That's the only reason why it looks cleaner. That wetter stuff is probably just as good, if not better. You can see this stuff's drying down a lot quicker. That wetter stuff is pretty green yet on the far end of the field there. But this is probably a little better than that tilled section of corn I showed you earlier on up closer to the road. This is probably some of my best corn I've ever grown. I mean, these ears are bigger, and the same thing, a lot of plants have 2 ears. This is gonna be a ton of corn right here. Probably way more than what they need. It's drying down real nice. Getting easier to walk through it. So I think I might have said this in the last update, but I'm in the NutriCrave right now. You can see a lot of these ears are actually quite small. That's simply due to because this seed is definitely a little smaller than the field corn seed was, so that it ran through the planter a little faster than what it should have. You can see we got like 4 plants right there and like a foot. Actually, here's a 5th one. 2 right next to each other. That's like 2 that were dropped in at the same time. So this corn is planted definitely a little too thick. That's why we got such small ears. I mean, look at that. I mean, they'll still eat them. But, and then right here, you get a large gap of nothing and you get a pretty good sized ear right here. And there's some other areas where it's not all quite this small, where there's actually quite a few big ears. And I'm gonna pick off a small ear and a big ear. And then same thing with the field corn. I'll pick off a small ear and a big ear. The field corn is a little more consistent throughout the field though. Like I said, it got planted at a better population rate. So right here's where it switches. from NutriCrave to field corn. And you can see a lot of this field corn has a lot higher chance of growing 2 years on one plant. That's just simply due to because it's planted at a little better population. And this stuff's definitely thicker when you just look at it like this too. But it's not planted too thick where you're gonna have reduction in yield. I think it's about right, if not slightly too high. It's not like way too high where it didn't produce much of anything. I mean, you look at it though, I mean, there's tons of ears on here. I mean, so it would have just been nice if it would have been a little bit thinner and we would have had a lot bigger ears like this one. So when I plant this stuff next year, I'm gonna have to test it out in the grass and stuff, see how thick it's coming out. Maybe get a special plate or fix something up for it, block some of the holes or something. It doesn't come out as thick. All right, I'll pick off a couple here. So right up that way is the drier section of the plot, and you can clearly see where the soil switches. It switches right here. Look at how green it is. A lot more moisture and a lot more weeds. I mean, it's just like it's like you're in a different field. Look how many weeds are in here, and look at how green this corn is yet. All planted the same day, all fertilized the same rate. And this goes like this all the way down to the brush here. It's just real weedy and a lot more green. And down here, we had some cranes thin out my corn. You can see how thin some of these sections are on here. Same thing, some of this got pulled out and it thinned. Holy crap, I just noticed how big this one was. I'll pick this one. There's some really big ears down here because it's obviously a lot thinner than the rest of the field. And it's greener too. It's had more moisture all year, so it's had a really good opportunity to grow some just massive ears on here. And it's weedy like this all the way down, so the whole field's pretty dark ground, but this is definitely a lot wetter section. Sometimes it's almost too wet to plow down here on a wet year, but we've had some pretty nice dry springs here the last couple years. We've gotten some pretty good crops out of here. So here's a good look at what that field produced. I got 2 good sized field corn ears and a little one. And I got 2 gigantic NutriCrave ears and then a smaller one from that thicker population section on the drier side of the field. You can clearly see it's definitely a lot redder in color. And as this stuff was growing, I don't know what it tastes like now. I should probably take a kernel off and eat a couple and see if I taste a difference. But a couple weeks ago, I was trying it, and this stuff was definitely more grainy and just starched blah tasting, where this NutriCrave definitely had a little sweeter flavor to it. Now, it does have a little bit more moisture in it right now than the field corn. The field corn's a little bit more dried down already. So I guess the true test is going to be when this stuff is fully dried down. You can see it's not denting nearly as much as this field corn has dented. So that might have something to do with it as well. So, but like I said, when I was trying it out, it was definitely tasting better than the field corn. Now, obviously the deer haven't really started hitting on it too hard, but I'll see here in the next couple months and definitely by the winter, we'll see what they like better. All right, I'll snap one of these big ones in half and one of these, and we'll see. So I surprisingly only ended up with 14 on this NutriCrave, and I got 16 on the field corn. Now you do see the NutriCrave kernels might be slightly bigger than the field corn. I don't know, but still though, for the length of it, 14 is made up for how long and how big that is. That's crazy. That's like some of the biggest ears of corn I've ever grown. But like I said, this has a whole nother row on it. So you shell these out, the NutriCrave probably just ends up with a little bit more than the field corn, considering it's one row around less. We'll take off a couple of these and eat them. Yeah, that's sweet. Starting to dry down more though, not as sweet as a couple weeks ago. Yeah, the field corn has no flavor, not sweet at all. Usually the sweetness comes from the tip of the kernel. NutriCrave definitely is sweeter. but it's starting to dry down too. It's not nearly as sweet as what it was, like I said, a couple weeks ago. So I don't know, we'll see how it tastes here in a couple weeks. I'll take you out to some of those other fields coming up. I got some more NutriCrave out there though. So this right here is probably our biggest section of corn. The last area I was in is literally just across those trees. That over there is probably about 3/4 of an acre of corn. This right here is probably at least 3/4, approaching 1 acre of corn here. And this is that field that it's just even darker, even wetter than where I just was. And the whole field's dark like this, unlike the other field where we got some drier ground where I can actually grow some beans over there. But in that low section in that last field, I can't really grow beans over there either. And in this whole entire field, I can't grow beans because the iron chlorosis in this black ground is just too strong, and the beans just suffer and the weeds take over. It just becomes a total loss. But the corn does fantastic in here. Now this stuff's definitely greener because it's, I think it was planted probably about a week later, and it's just greener because it's, you know, it's like the wetter side of that field too. It's just got more moisture in the ground here. Now you can see the amount of weeds in here. I'm in the field corn section. This field was never post-emerge sprayed with glyphosate. I cultivated it at least 3 times. I sprayed simazine the day we planted, and that was the only weed control done. You can see, you know, the weeds aren't too bad right here, but there is some other areas in there where there definitely is some bigger weeds. And I wouldn't say this is the best looking corn I've ever grown. I mean, it's good, it's nice, but the ears definitely aren't as big as what I thought they would have been, you know, when this stuff was really starting to take off. I don't think I fertilized a whole lot on this field either. I think I had 3 bags of 9-23-31, not much nitrogen, on this whole acre field. So right now I'm in the NutriCrave. I got in the center of the field, we had 2 rows of sweet corn and some Indian corn and a little test row of soybeans. And then I had, I had some 85-day corn leftover seed from last year. I'll show you that in a second. Then I had like roughly 6 to 8 rows of NutriCrave on each side, and then the field corn on the 100-day field corn on the edges. So here's some big NutriCrave ears here. I probably won't waste a bunch of time picking a bunch of corn in here because it's kind of the same comparison really. I will pick off some ears off that 85-day corn, I guess, and I'll compare it. That would be kind of interesting. So right here, these outer 2 rows, you can see they're a little shorter. This is the 85-day corn, the leftover seed from last year. That's what most of this field was planted into last year, the 85-day corn. You can see this stuff is already starting to dry down. Probably slightly smaller ears, but still not too bad. Probably just a slightly smaller than the 100-day corn in here. And a lot of this NutriCrave, this whole field has bigger ears. And it's still planted pretty thick. It's just got bigger ears because it's got more moisture, I think. On that drier section of that other field, there was certain times throughout the summer when that corn really shriveled up bad. And it being planted so thick, it was just struggling for moisture. And this 85-day corn here is just really thin. A lot of it didn't come up or something. I don't know why it's so thin here, but... And then boom, right here's my my soybeans. They're pretty much gone. They never really did much. Right here's the sweet corn. And then now we're back. Now we're getting across the field here. Now we're back into the NutriCrave here. And there is some volunteer corn in here. That's why it's kind of thick, and there's corn growing in the middle of the rows and stuff. Right here's a better look. Same thing, pretty good size of NutriCrave ears on this side. This side of the field actually looks a little better. I haven't really walked around this field too much recently. Yeah, holy smokes, look how tall it is right in here. And you can see we got some root lodging kind of going on, and they're kind of tipping over because, like I said, this NutriCrave probably is planted a little thick, and this ground being so loose. I mean, if we would have got a heavy storm, it would have flattened probably a lot of it, so I'm kind of lucky. These ears are literally at my head in here. All of them. So when these things tip down, I mean, they'll be at your chest, which is still pretty high for a lot of deer, fawns and stuff. I mean, these are like, holy smokes. I don't know how the deer are going to eat these. This is all NutriCrave right here. I mean, the top of this ear is probably 7 foot. Bottom of it's like, you know, about 6 foot. So not everyone's that high, but most of them are about eye level with me, maybe slightly lower. But you can see we do have a lot of plants just leaning around in here. And there's a couple big weeds in here, like that giant ragweed plant right there. So it'll be interesting to see once this stuff fully dries down, if it's gonna stay standing. It should. Essentially, there's probably more weight on the plant right now than what there will be when it dries down. But I know sometimes when you get into the fall and especially the spring, man, this corn is gonna be tipping over like crazy because everything's thawing out and getting wet. So, but by then, it won't really matter. All right, so I just moved a couple rows over. Now I'm back into the field corn. Definitely shorter. The plant itself is probably just maybe like a foot shorter, but the ears, the highest ones I'm seeing are about eye level, which is pretty much average, like right here. This is like the highest one I've seen over here. This is pretty much average what the NutriCrave was doing. So the NutriCrave, those ears are quite high. So, but in the wintertime, this will be one heck of a test because all the deer are coming out from that direction. They'll have to walk past all this field corn to get to my NutriCrave in the center of the plot. We'll see if they do it. I mean, if it's as attractive as what they say, they should walk right through this. And I'll mow a couple paths through here so it's easier for them deer to walk through here. Walk right past this stuff and get to the NutriCrave. We'll see how much they're really eating on this stuff. And you can clearly see there's definitely some pretty big weeds. You see how this weed is growing right inside the row? That's because, you know, I was able to cultivate out all the bigger weeds as the plants were growing inside the rows. But then like these bigger weeds right next to the corn plants inside the rows, they never got killed because, you know, the cultivator's not going to get them. Like I said, I never sprayed. So there is some pretty good sized 7 foot tall water hemp plants in here, but a little bit of weeds in here didn't really affect the corn. I got pretty much crop dominance here, so the corn was not very affected. The weeds never got up and past the corn. If that would have happened, I would have had to have sprayed, because when I was cultivating this, it never really looked like the weeds were taking over too bad, so I never really wasted the time and money to spray this. And you know, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. The Simazine could have did a slightly better job holding back weeds, but like I said, we had probably a 2-week dry spell after planting where we didn't get any rain to wash in the Simazine to make it effective. But when we planted, the soil had enough moisture to pop the seed out of the ground within days. All right, that's enough looking at this field. We got to get up to that little soybean plot there, and another little small NutriCrave plot, and the flag plot before the video's over. This will probably be over a half-hour video, guys. Sorry about taking so long here, but I like to record everything so I know I can always look back myself and see, you know, what the crop looked like, you know, 2-3 years ago. It's kind of nice. So I was just in this field right here. Right behind me here's my little half-acre section of soybeans this year. Pretty weedy. The deer have been nipping them like crazy this year. I got brassicas coming up in between all the rows, all these wide 38-inch rows. You look up these rows, man, it's just greening up with brassica. I got beautiful knee to waist high brassicas going down this way in this really wet ground field. These kale plants are just absolutely huge. And then I got little 1/4 acre section of NutriCrave right here. This is all strictly NutriCrave. Obviously never sprayed, just simazine in the spring and cultivated 3 times. And this stuff didn't quite do as good. You can see it's only, you know, maybe 8 to 9 feet tall here, but up there it's a little better. I don't think we fertilized this plot enough, and like I said, it's planted way thicker than what it should have been. You can see. But still produced okay. I mean, if this right here is kind of root lodging in here. I don't want to spend a ton of time in here. I got to show you the beans yet. And then up here is where this corn did better. And look at the weed control in this field, just absolutely amazing. You can clearly see this is a different type of soil than that really black wet ground field. In these better soils I can get a lot better weed control, and this stuff is noticeably drier, drying down a lot faster. Kind of the same thing, we got some smaller ears and some bigger ears. Nothing quite as big as that other NutriCrave section I was, you know, I pulled those really big ones out of, but still some pretty nice ears in here. And this little chunk of corn here, this is gonna last a while. I mean, this will last longer than you think. As good as this produced, I mean, these ears are literally all rubbing and touching each other because this stuff's planted so thick. I mean, that's like boom, 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 boom. That's like 6 or 7 ears right there in like a 1.5 feet. Unbelievable. So here's a quick comparison of the 3 corn varieties I have in this field. NutriCrave is still the biggest. This is the 108 day, or I mean, NutriCrave is 108 day. This is 100-day field corn. This is 85-day field corn. So you can clearly see the difference. The faster growing corn is going to grow slightly smaller ears. I'm not going to snap on these in half and count them up. We'll just compare with the rest of the corn at the end of the video here of what the corn looks like from each field. Okay, we're in the beans now. Another reason why these beans have been kind of smaller this year, you know, the drought is the main factor, but like I said early on with my soybean videos, there is like literally no beans around. I mean, you got to go pretty long direction that way, pretty long ways that way before you get to any soybeans. And my little tiny bean plots, man, this is probably the most browse I've ever seen. Out here I was still able to grow beans and produce some pods for them, but obviously the corn will be the main winter carryover food source. These beans will be gone pretty quick. But man, there's been unbelievable deer sign in these beans all summer. And now I got all these brassicas coming up, filling in these rows, just providing more food. Look at how nipped on these are. And they're still trying to fill out a lot of these pods. Looks like, you know, the next week here is going to be like 70s, almost back into the 80s next weekend. So a lot of these pods should fill out. They should have time to fill out here, even though it's getting close to October. And these brassicas are going to continue to grow all the way till we get a frost. These things are doing pretty good in here where these beans are shorter, but the brassicas I seeded in where the beans are taller in there more, they're not doing quite as good. But look at this. Every single leaf is gone almost. Pretty crazy. Like this corner up here, man, is just hit really hard. And then you get in here and there's definitely more weeds. The weeds kind of took over more than what I would have liked them to, but they didn't really harm the bean growth too much because I kept the weeds down, you know, early on. And then from August on, this is kind of turned into kind of a weedy mess here, but not terrible. There's still a lot of pods in here, so I'll pick off like a good sized plant in here and we'll compare it to the first bean plot I picked off one, and this whole area is all the 38-inch rows. Just deer tracks absolutely everywhere in this whole field. And like I said, this is probably only at the most a half acre of beans, so I'm lucky that I can still grow beans on a half acre, even on a heavily planted corn year where pretty much all the farm fields around are all corn. Or like next year there'll be a lot of beans around, so my beans won't get hit nearly as hard, and there won't be nearly as many does and stuff hanging around during the summertime, because I was seeing lots of deer out here in the summer months, more than what I would normally see, because like I said, just having this bean food source here really attracted a lot of does to the area this summer. So these two plants were growing like right next to each other. I ended up pulling both of them out. You can see how good a branching we have, how branched out these are, being planted on such wide rows. We'll count up this one. All right, so here we are. We got a pile of 40, a pile of 38, so a total of 78 on this plant. And same thing as the last bean field, a ton of single and 2 bean pods. There wasn't a single pod on this plant with 4 beans in it. Where like in previous years, you know, there's been a handful on every plant I've checked, and not too many flat ones on this bean plant. So maybe, I don't know, whatever it grew, it filled out pretty much. But like I said, there's just tons of them with just 2 beans in each one. I'd have to say probably a third of the pods on this plant, if not 40%. I mean, look at all these. So yeah, definitely a smaller bean crop than the last couple years for sure with this drought. All right, final plot. We're out here in the flag plot now. I got my strips of corn and strips of beans. You can see these strips of beans are pretty much filling in with Brassica because they've just been overbrowsed the whole summer. I mean, there is pods on there, but these are definitely my worst looking beans this year. And this corn, the corn did okay. It actually surprised me a lot. The deer nipped off. You can see how chomped on the corn is. You can almost look right through it in certain sections. Like in certain areas, 50% of the plants got nipped off at a young state, you know, when the stuff was like waist to shoulder high. But it's still through an ear and got pretty good pollination without even having a tassel here. I mean, these tassels around here, they actually did a pretty good job of spreading the pollen around and pollinating these plants. And having it on 4 rows like this, you got like sunlight on this side, sunlight on that side. Almost every plant in here has 2 ears because it's like essentially all these rows are like end rows where they're getting more sunlight. So you get a higher chance of them growing 2 ears per plant. And I look through here, and like right here's the first one I've seen. Right here's another one with just 1. But the large majority of these plants all have 2 ears. So I may consider planting more corn like this on 4 row, on a 4 row pattern like this, even if the deer completely nip off like half of the corn. It's crazy. It was still able to pollinate, like these ones way out here. See that? All the way down. It's a little messy looking, but it's pretty good. And if it wouldn't have got touched at all, it would have been even better. So I'm gonna definitely plant some corn like this somewhere next year, I feel like, because man, you're essentially doubling your yield when you're getting extra sunlight in here like this, and every plant is producing 2 ears, almost doubling your yield probably. Plus it just gives the deer, you know, a lot more of this cover, because you can see they've been destroying these beans all summer, but that's just because there hasn't many beans around. But this kind of gives them like a lane to run through and hide in here and feel safe in here, and you know, the last hour of daylight. And these brassicas are just coming in beautifully, filling in all these gaps. That's going to screw up the flag look at this plot a little bit, because essentially the only area I wanted it green was up there where the stars are, where where the flag's supposed to be blue, where now that's going to be brassica. These whole lanes will be full of green brassicas once these beans dry down. So it's not going to look quite as good as I envisioned, but I'll at least have the corn strips here to really, you know, be able to tell these are the stripes, you know, the flag. These beans this way, I guess, do look a little better. for size wise, they're still just hammered. I mean, look at this, unbelievably browsed. And these two, they were planted, I don't know, like late May, maybe early June, I don't remember, but they'll stay green here for at least another week or two before they're fully brown and yellow. And there are some pretty weedy sections in this corn here too. This is right here's the last strip of these beans. And then these 4 rows are NutriCrave right here. This corn did not do good here because we got all these big trees right here and they're sucking a lot of nutrients from the corn. And I've also should point out that the NutriCrave is probably slightly less drought tolerant than the field corn variety I planted, because for sure in this field and in a few other areas on that first NutriCrave plot I took you to, the Field of Dreams plot where I had those 8 rows, that NutriCrave, like I said, shriveled up. Definitely a little worse than the field corn did. And I should have put this NutriCrave like right here to get a better test, because a lot of this didn't really do much of anything. It was just too drought stressed, being in this drier section of this field, being next to these trees. And you can see in here, it hardly produced anything. If I would have planted that corn here, it probably would have did a little better, but it still wouldn't have did great, because it's just too close to these trees. We got some ears in here, but they're quite small. Right here's a decent one. So there is a little bit in here that I'll be able to compare against this winter when they start eating on the corn heavy. So there is a little bit in here at least. All right, that's pretty much it for the update. I'm gonna get the drone in the air. I'm not even gonna pick one of these bean plants. It's probably pretty similar to the last field. I'm gonna get the drone in the air and I'll get a little video at the end here, and yeah, that'll be it for corn and soybeans until the winter updates. So yeah. So here's the final corn comparison. This right here is the first couple areas I was in. Here's that no-till corn. It hasn't quite dented yet. Got a little more moisture than the rest of this stuff. Here's the same variety of corn in that wetter ground field, and here's the silage corn. And then here's the second field I was in, the Field of Dreams, where that really big NutriCrave came from. And same thing. Look at this field corn. Field corn, field corn, field corn. Pretty consistent across all the fields, across the no-till, the first wet field, the second wet field, and the third wet field right here. A lot of wet ground fields out here. Here's the 85-day corn. That was a pretty good sized one, bigger than some of the other ones around, and it was planted pretty thin, so that's as big as what they got. So it's definitely a little smaller than the 100-day corn, which would make sense. Here's the 2 NutriCrave side by side. This NutriCrave corn was probably fertilized a little heavier and planted at least, I think we planted that first area at least a week prior, but just having more fertilizer out there probably what made it, you know, grow better. And this one still ain't bad, but yeah, so I thought that was kind of a neat little comparison. We got the one area silage corn, a little bit bigger in the field corn varieties, but these deer don't really like eating on this stuff as much because the husk pulls back a lot harder than the rest of these corn, so they don't really eat on it. They don't really, that's the last stuff they'd eat. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with my corn crop this year. This is as good as any year for corn, but my beans, man, they've really taken a beating this year between the deer browse and the drought. Just kind of really set them back, but plus the weeds kind of took over a lot of my beans this year too. So yeah, we'll get that drone in the air here in a second and get a little video